Horrible DC judge Tanya Chutkan, Obama appointee, Obama soon to divorce and trade up to Jennifer Aniston appointee, uses very strange words to describe Trump's pardons. Welcome to the Doug TenNapel channel. Let's get to the article over on the Hill. This headline should give you some idea of what I'm talking about. Blood, feces, and terror. Judges are raging over Trump pardon. This is by Jonathan Turley, one of our favorites over at Fox News. Ooh, there's grouchy. Judge Chutkan, the 1990s want their blouse back, even though President Trump had made it a campaign pledge to pardon. That is, everyone voted for Trump knowing what he was going to do. Even though he made that pledge to pardon those involved in the January 6, 2021 campaign riot, the roughly 1,500 pardons Trump issued on his first day produced familiar reactions from politicians and pundits. I'll let you guys guess. What do you think their reactions were? Oh, were their reactions what they said of Biden's pardons? It's his right. He's allowed. The Hunter Biden pardon. In Philadelphia, District Attorney Larry Krasner pledged to pursue those pardoned or commuted with new charges on the state level. He's going to get them, eclipsing Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg in repackaging federal crimes as state offenses. That's what Alvin Bragg did to Trump on the hush money case. He elevated what should have been just a state offense to a federal crime. That's why they invented the cover-up accusation. Others cited the pardons as evidence of an even greater plot or purpose. On MSNBC, former NAACP, Legal Defense and Education Funds head Cheryl Ifill declared that the pardons were all part of a plan to build an army of brown shirts. Not to be outdone, Rep. Jamie Raskin, who said Trump would be disqualified on January 6th, warned that Trump was issuing pardons to create, quote, a reserve army of political foot soldiers to act on behalf of MAGA and Donald Trump. Now, I've seen clips of these guys. They're gentle as doves.
Good morning, everyone. Shane Jenkins here. Today is day 2 of post-pardon freedom.
All they have is scare tactics, guys. They've got nothing left. Such hyperbole, particularly the Nazi references, is now commonplace. and no one believes them, guys. It used to be such an offense, and now it's just pre-dismissed. Indeed, the left jumped the shark on the Nazi mania and death of democracy mantra months ago. This week, however, some of the most strident comments seem to be coming from the federal bench itself. So it's one thing when you and I throw around the Nazi thing. It's another thing when it's a judge like Chutkan. People in the highest position. They are held to a higher responsibility, and that's even true biblically. Indeed, some judges use dismissal hearings to launch into what seemed at points like cable-ready commentary. Take District Court, Tanya Chutkan, an Obama appointee. Obama, how's Jennifer Aniston doing this morning? Your wife, Michelle Obama, went on an extended trip during the inauguration. That was her excuse. She said, I went on an extended trip to Hawaii, to one of our mansions. That's a terrible excuse, by the way, because as if she didn't know that the inauguration would be on January 20th, and then she acted like I didn't know when I planned my trip. Do you think she would have made it for the Kamala Harris inauguration? Do you think she might have come off her vacation for that victory lap? And I want to tell you who had previously presided over Trump's election interference case. Chutkan had been criticized for failing to rescue herself from that case after she made highly controversial statements about Trump from the bench, proving that she was not an impartial judge. She did not recuse herself. In a sentencing hearing of January 6th riot 2022, Chutkan said that the riots, quote, were there in fealty, in loyalty to one man, Bigley, not to the Constitution. She added then, it's a blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day, she cried. She mourned. Keep crying, your liberal tears taste great. That one person was still under investigation at the time, and when Trump was charged, Chutkan refused to let the case go. She then pursued Trump with a vigor second only to special counsel Jack Smith. In the latest hearing, Chutkan again decided to use the bench to amplify her own views of the pardons of January 6th. She proclaimed that the pardons could not change the, quote, tragic truth, unquote, and cannot whitewash the blood, feces, and terror that the mob left in its wake, and it cannot repair the jagged breach in America's sacred tradition of peacefully transitioning power. They're going to keep beating that drum forever. It's all in their mind. We had a peaceful transition of power. It was very peaceful. We had a riot, and the question is, did the state not foment that? But blood, feces, and terror, that sounds like the streets of her buddy Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco, if anything, or downtown Portland in some areas, downtown LA in some areas. She should talk to Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi about the blood, feces, and terror. I don't think she cares, guys. I mean, we already know this is just politics. In fairness, judges often express the gravity of offenses at sentencing, and most of us certainly share a strong revulsion over what occurred on January 6th. However, these cases are being dismissed after an election whose winner explicitly pledged to close the prosecutions through executive clemency. So it's rare that a judge would make this kind of comment. It's actually apropos, it's appropriate after the judgment, but she never made a judgment. The defendant in her courtroom was there to have a required dismissal entered in his case, not to hear Chutkan speaking truth to power. In this case, she is the power. It is the power to rule dispassionately on the specific case before her. It's not the power to hold court on the merits of presidential decisions. That's right. They're all legal, guys, like them or not. Pardons are a way of life. But one thing Chutkan I thought was very strange is that she claimed to be for the Constitution. Now, these J6ers, perhaps this one that she's talking to, they are sharing stories now of how they were treated in prison. Now, this was a Christian man who, because he would not take the shot, they would not let him have visitations for 2 years. That's cruel and unusual. They wouldn't let him visit the barber. He wasn't allowed to do the prison barber shop unless he took the vaccine. They were punishing them. He couldn't get his tooth fixed and go to the dentist. He has a broken front tooth. They wouldn't let him attend worship services. This is a Christian.
Clearly, I need to get to the dentist to get this tooth fixed because I broke my veneer opening the coffee pack. One of the more minor things, they denied us also because we refused to get vaccinated. They denied us visitation for 2 years. They denied us religious services for 2 years in the DC jail. It would have been very simple to come to the unit and offer us communion or have Bible studies or bring chaplain volunteers down there to have, services with us.
The government prevented from the free exercise thereof of his faith, breaking the First Amendment Constitution. Now, Chutkan does not care about that, and that's how you know she's a fraud. She doesn't care about the Constitution. None of them. Down the hall, Chutkan's colleague, Beryl Howell, also an Obama appointee, there's too many of them, lashed out at Trump's actions, writing, "This court cannot let stand the revisionist myth relayed in this presidential pronouncement." Yet all of it paled in comparison to what their colleague, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta, also an Obama appointee. Is there anyone involved who was not an Obama appointee? What he did with the January 6th case is he ordered J6 defendants to seek prior approval before going to Capitol Hill or even coming within any of the 69 square miles of the nation's capital. Thus, Mehta practically banished Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes and 7 other defendants. It does not appear that Trump Justice Department requested such restrictions, but Mehta was able to impose them because those defendants had received commutations rather than pardons. A commutation does not require the dismissal of a case, and the courts are generally allowed to set the conditions for release of the defendants. This is the biggest assault on free speech. However, these new conditions imposed after presidential commutations, more importantly, they could affect the exercise of the First Amendment rights, from free speech to free association to the right to petition the government. For example, Rhodes and others would have to disclose intended meetings with members of Congress or participation in political events. Rhodes previously asked to speak to the House committee that investigated the riot, but the Democrat-controlled committee refused to allow it. By Democrat-controlled, he means Liz Cheney, a Yale graduate. Rhodes insisted that the hearing be conducted in public, the very condition Hunter Biden made with the support of some of the same members. What if Rhodes now wants to meet privately with members to supply his testimony? He would need Judge Mehta to approve it and potentially make such plans public. I was particularly concerned in the cases, this is Turley, with sentences that seemed visceral, even gratuitous in denying free speech rights. In Washington, judges imposed limits on what political views defendants could read or share. For example, Judge Reggie B. Walton, a Bush appointee who had previously called Trump a charlatan, had before him a typical J6 case of Daniel Goodwin, 35, of Corinth, Texas. Goodwin pleaded guilty on January of 2023 to one misdemeanor count of entering and remaining in a restricted building. It is a minor offense that generated little jail time. However, Walton faulted Goodwin for appearing on Fox News and spreading disinformation, and so he ordered the government to monitor what he was viewing and discussing. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rebuked Walton for that surveillance order, but he doubled down. On remand, the Biden Justice Department insisted that Goodwin was unrepentant and still viewing extremist media. This is about the two-tiered justice system, those J6ers. I just want to say, think about prisoners, okay? You have to still give them their free speech rights. They don't lose that in going to prison. Now, one of the J6 defendants who's been released and pardoned, he said that in the prison, they weren't allowed to have religious exemption of the COVID vax, and therefore they weren't allowed to attend worship services and praise God and worship and study the Bible under their free speech rights. You'd go, well, he's a prisoner. But he makes the observation that in that same prison were a bunch of Islamists who were in prison. The Islamists were given a religious exemption from taking the vaccine, and they were still allowed to gather to worship without the vaccine.
They weren't trying to hear that. The mosque was open the whole time. They weren't forcing the Muslims to get the vaccine. As a matter of fact, they told the DC inmates notified us they were allowing Muslims to use a religious excuse to not have to get the vaccine.
This is all political. The government, in performing that alone, that removal of his expression of free speech and being able to worship, that alone is a breach of the Constitution. And these judges are all more horrified. I'm more horrified when the government breaches the First Amendment than I am when a citizen punches a cop. I'm not for punching cops. I think you should always be punished. But the idea that these guys got a greater punishment for that than your government, which is held to a higher account, higher responsibility, especially a judge. These people are going to judge hell. And really, this just further exposes his new data on Judge Chutkan being politicized, foul. All of these three judges that are Obama appointees are all foul, all anti-Constitution. And so we collectively are calling them out and giving the information to you, just because there's a lot of media, they'll never say anything good about the J6ers. And I'll never say something good about these judges until they perform their constitutional duty. I'm Doug in exile.